you know.
So now we can get to Purim.
And tonight, but it's 30 days till Purim, you know, which is, and Purim is 30 days till Pesach, you know. So we can talk about Pesach. Yeah.
What's he going this year? Where are you speaking?
So. Yeah, but there's plenty to say about Tu B'Shvat, and even having to do and tie in Bez Hashem with this week's parsha, you know, with the Aseret Dibros. And there's two parts. We spoke a little bit about last week that there's two parts to the tree. There's a hidden part and there's a revealed part. Right? I once heard such a beautiful idea like this many years ago, that what you know, people the inventions that man make are mixed blessings. You know, things that people that, for example, whatever, an atomic bomb, you could blow up a city, you know, or you could light up a city. Depends on how it's used. You know, a match for fire. You could use that same match. You could use that same fire to warm up some food, to cook, you know, for Shabbos, and to light the Shabbos candles to bring light into the home. Or you could use it chas v'shalom. It could become something which is destructive. It doesn't have, you know, an absolute direction. It depends upon how it's to be used. So there was an invention that was made a number of years ago by a very clever fella, and we benefit from it. We all benefit from it. What a revolution he made in the whole universe. And that's Thomas Edison, right? Invented the light bulb, amongst many other things. And we take a look and we say, wow, we got light bulbs out here. Ain't this great, you know? You know, that means instead of blundering around and bumping into each other in the dark, we can come out at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night and come to a Torah shir. Look what we accomplished. The person wants to be a masmid. He wants to stay up till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. You know, he can be a masmid and he can stay up late and learn Torah. Gewaltig. So I don't see any downside to the light bulb. Yeah. Except maybe when we consider the following notion, Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch, right? I'm sure everybody heard of Rav Hirsch. Wow. So Rav Hirsch, you know, in his one of his essays, writes the following things: how come HaKadosh Baruch Hu made Vayhi Erev Vayhi Voker Yom Echad? You know, how come the world is spinning around this idea of there's an evening and that there's a morning? You know, why an evening and why a morning? You know, let's just, you know, keep it all light. You know, let the light shine like the moon on one side, and, you know, let everybody live on that side who wants light, and everybody wants dark, go on the other side. Why alternating all the time, night and day? And how come, like we spoke about a little bit last time also, it's night and it's day. It's not day and then it's night. So there's an appreciation to night. We've sort of chased away the night with the light bulb. You know, we've lost, you know, we've created a different type of nightlife, but we've lost the appreciation of what night is. You know, let's take a look and see what day is, first of all. And this is really the explanation, you know, in a poetic way that Rav Hirsch says, is that a person is like a tree, like the pasuk says later on in Parshas Ki Seitzei, Ki Odem Eitz Asada. A person is a tree in the field. And when we say that a person is a tree in the field, there's two parts to the tree. There's the part that's revealed, that we see, that's giving off all the hefty duty fruits, and its arms are stretched up into the heavens, and, you know, that's the one that, you know, everybody recognizes and gives off the applause to. And then there's a whole other underground hidden network of roots that draws up through the xylem and phylum, that takes the minerals out of the ground, and that brings them up through the veins of the tree, and that produces the fruit. That's doing the work from underground and from the inside out. And therefore, when we take a look and we see what happens at day, so when daytime, a person's eyes can see out to the horizon. Sometimes you go to a vista, and you can take a look and you can see thousands of miles in one direction. You know, certainly not thousands, but you see hundreds of miles, you know, from some mountain vista. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to catch, you know, and to see so far. And the reason is, the benefit is for a person traveling and doing his business during the daytime, so he can travel he can see what he needs to accomplish during the daytime. He can pick up some food, and he can travel to his destination, settle down. You know, in a world with natural light, you know, what happens is, as the sun begins to set, so the time is starting to tick. You know, the Kodesh Baruch Hu put like a little bit, like a sundial into the world, and begin to realize as the shadows elongate, it's time to find a place to settle down before it gets dark. You know, because when it gets dark, it gets pretty dark, right? And then even after the sun set, the light remains in the sky for a while until the moon comes out. But even after the moon comes out, anybody ever went camping, or anybody ever, you know, sat through a blackout, a real neighborhood blackout, or even if the the what's it called, the fuse box blew in the house. Right? You ever had such an experience like that? And it's see yourself the forest with what it's like to live in a world. Without, right, and that's why for to enjoy food. Enjoyment of the food is come red color of the Pavlovian juices begin to flow. You know, you start to really like, and you look at it. You know, food, and that, you know, that's part. After you put it in your mouth and you chew it, you know. So the Mesilas Yesharim says it. You know, then it's just the hana of a moment as it goes down the base of Bli over here. Everything is presentation. So Kodesh Baruch Hu made, we spoke about earlier in the other room over there, that's a world of presentation. Kodesh Baruch Hu made a beautiful, beautiful presentation world. So that's why on Shabbos it's very important to have lights, because without those lights, you know, we're stuck. I remember that one Shabbos the lights went out, and all we had was the light of the Shabbos candle. I forget how it was. It was a neighborhood blackout. Oh, yeah. Then there was a song like that on when 2000, right, when the Y2K. We'll just have the light. These extra tall candles, because we're ready for, you know, for the world to end on that day or something, you know. But it didn't end. You know, we had Baruch Hashem, we had the light of the Shabbos candle. Thank you very much. So light is very, very important. But once it gets dark, boy, does it get dark, and it's a very, you know, almost an absolute feeling of darkness. And therefore, during the daytime, our eyes are out to the horizon. We can see far, we can see whatever it is that we need, and then what happens is, as the dark closes in on us, you know, we rarely have this experience. When the dark closes in on us, suddenly we are enveloped in a world where we can't see anything in front of us, and then what happens is, their eye naturally turns inward. That's what happens. The world gets quiet, right? You ever go into one of these neighborhoods where there's not much else happening, like it's a Shomer Shabbos neighborhood on a Friday night, and you can hardly hear anything. You know, there's Brooklyn and Queens, it's hard to pick up on those sounds. But you go out into the suburbs, you go into somehow in the desert, in Eretz Yisrael or something in the Negev, you know, and you can hear the sound of silence. You can hear the thud, the deep thud of no sound at all. You know, hardly a cricket or a coyote off in the distance. Nothing, a zero that's happening over there. And then when it gets that darn quiet, so the person's eyes turn inward. That's why we just mentioned that Chodesh Shvat, you know, is a time for Torah Sheba'al Peh. You know, also Hanukkah time, also during the winter time, the days were getting shorter. Now the days are getting longer. But in the middle of the winter time is a time when the days are much longer, and that's a time for Torah Sheba'al Peh. Why is that a time for Torah Sheba'al Peh? Because we have two different Torahs. One is Asher Nasan Lanu Torahs Emes, right? That's part of the bracha that we mentioned when we get called up, and the other is V'chayei Olam Nata B'socheinu. Nata is a lashon nitiyah, like planting, right? Planting. Kodesh Baruch Hu planted eternal life inside each and every one of us. And so what happens is, in order to sprout, in order to grow that piece of eternal life, that's Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's the oral Torah. The oral Torah doesn't mean Gemara, it means Svara. It means that the person is connecting to Torah and discussing Torah and thinking. V'yege Yom V'layla, the person is thinking and meditating on Torah. That's what it's all about. Right, and someone said they saw a bumper sticker that says maybe the hokey pokey is really what it's all about. I have serious doubt about that. You put your right hand in, you put your right hand out, and you turn yourself about. You do the hokey pokey. That's what it's all about. I remember growing up with that. That's not what it's all about. What it's all about is that the person during the daytime he could look at the words of the Torah that were given. The Torah Shebiksav, Asher Nasan Lano Torah's Emes. That's a reliable notes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to us, and then our digestion of it and our inclusion in Torah, in the discussion of the Torah, in the blog, right? That's what the Gemara is. It's a blog, and we're being invited into the discussion, into the blog post over there. V'chai olam not to besochenu, and it's meant to be oral. It's meant to be discussed. It's meant to be thought about, and therefore, when a person has the nighttime, so there's no possibility of taking a look at a script and seeing what's written any place. So after having learned all day long and done what we need to do all day long, so suddenly the eyes of the person turn inwardly, and now we begin to think and to cogitate. To think. Thinking is an activity into itself. As a matter of fact, it's so much so an activity that people are lazy to avoid it. A lot of activity. I saw a quote like this: "There's no genius like the genius that people employ in order to avoid the heavy work of thinking." Right? Sometimes you see a nice yeshiva boy. He does well in Chumash, and he did well when he was in 3rd and 4th grade, and in Chumash, and they started learning Mishnah. Mishnah Gavaldik, and then he gets into 6th and 7th grade, and he has a very hard time. What's happening? He's a smart boy because as long as he was memorizing, he could say the words and repeat back and spit back, and now all of a sudden the Rebbe says, "I want you to think." Oh, you want me to think? And that's a hard job to do. He has to actually turn on his mind, and he's got to focus. And thinking is a sweaty, internally sweaty detail. It's a hard work. That's what it's all about. And therefore, when the lights go out and the person has nothing else to distract him and no place else to go, then he's left with himself, and he has to do something about thinking. He has to begin to think, right? It's almost maddening, right? That's why I had this theory why people never wanted to come for Shabbos. I used to invite people to Shabbos all the time. I might have described it some other time. I even have in my wallet over here a Shabbos card. I think I got the last one when my wife and I were first married. Here, still got it. What?
Apple Day?
No, that's a different one. That's the one. Yeah, this is one when my wife and I were first married. Here, I got it in here someplace. If I didn't have all these other things in my wallet. How about that? A Shabbos invitation, right? I have it laminated. What? So this was, and it had a picture of grapes and a picture of candles with lights, emanating from it. It didn't have a picture of a hammer with with a line through it. And I gave out. We made 499 of these babies, right? And I gave out. We made 500 of them. I gave out 499. This is the last one. This is the last. And after giving out 499, not standing in the street and handing them out buy a suit, come inside. No, nothing, like that, man, nothing like that. I went to a wedding. I stood next to a guy, a fellow with a little pink, yarmulke that perched precariously on top of his head, I said, "Hi, what's your name?" Phil. I said, "What's your Hebrew name?" Fievel. "Oh, hi, Fievel." Suddenly he's like this little bar mitzvah boy. I said, "Come, let's get into the circle and dancing a little bit." Judaism is not a spectator sport, And then we'd spend, how come the women over there, the men? Oh, it's a good question. Let's get into a discussion. After spending 2 hours with my arm draped over the shoulders fell and sitting and eating, a Suda, dancing with him and, talking about and sharing my life, I said, "Come join us for Shabbos sometime." "Wow, come, here's it for Shabbos." I gave out 499. And guess how many people came for Shabbos? The answer is? What? Oh, you think too much of me. And the answer is none. Not even one. Not even one. Can you imagine what a failure I felt like? Imagine a salesman, what a rejected salesman. I wonder. They didn't even taste my wife's food. It's not like they tasted it and rejected it, or And it was. Yeah. Thank you, Yirmiyahu. It was. And they were straight. And they weren't total strangers that I was inviting. And I wasn't even asking them for any money or anything. They think maybe I'm going to hit them up for a donation or something like that. I don't have an institution. I don't have anything. There was no fundraising. There was no ulterior motive. Come up, enjoy. We'll sit. We'll have 25 hours of pleasure, right? And I realized people are scared. And what are they scared of? I found out a few different other reasons. I had a couple of reasons. I came up with a couple of new reasons, that people suggested to me. Number one, I realized also that if people are afraid, they might like it. I think they're afraid they might like it. And also, I think they're afraid that they might not like it because it's not so easy to be in an environment where you don't know exactly what the rules are, and that's very uncomfortable for people. You don't know what you don't know what you're not supposed to touch or what you're supposed to touch, and can I move this? Did I just do something wrong? And there's so many variables and unknowns to them that they might feel or socially awkward. I can understand that, but there's another reason I discovered. I once heard Rabbi Abraham Twersky. I'm sure you all heard of Rabbi Twersky. So he was speaking. This is 27 years ago at a Torah Masorah convention, speaking at the Great Lawn of the Homewack Hotel. Yeah, on a Shabbos afternoon, and he said that there's a psychological principle that a person does not like being locked into a no exit situation with somebody that they don't like. So that's what the great, big, tremendous dread when you're being assigned a roommate at a Shabbaton, or you're getting onto a plane and you're trying to figure out, who am I going to be locked next to, or who's going to sit in front of me with my big knees, trying to find a comfortable seat, and someone's going to insist that they're going to go back all the way, and I'm going to be stuck with this for the next 12 hours, gritting my teeth, and people don't want to sit next to me either, what can I say? So, he says, and that's a psychological principle. Now, you don't have to be a famous psychologist or psychiatrist in order to know that principle. But then he says the next following step. He says, now that the syndrome, the phenomena, he says, amplified and intensified, he says, and becomes much more painful. He says, if that person happens to be yourself. And it could be that that's where the real fright of Shabbos comes from, is because people are afraid not of what to do and what not to do, but of what happens when it gets very silent. What happens in the quiet of Shabbos. You're walking back, and there's no radio to distract you, and there's no turning on and off lights and changing things. Where you're sort of like stuck with the status quo as it is. You're stuck with yourself. And you're stuck with your family, and you're stuck with you can't run anywhere. And that is probably the biggest, that thud that we spoke about of silence is one of the greatest dread. I exercise, now, Baruch Hashem, I've been exercising for a while, and I found that one of the hardest things to do, one of the hardest things to do in the whole universe is, not the exercise. Exercise is easy, if you find, is what to do with your brain while you're exercising, and that's why in the gyms they have these, they have some, mindless, the TV or something like that up. But if a person doesn't have that, he needs to go out into the woods and run 3 miles, around the lake. And at first it was maddening. I thought I was going to go crazy. Not so much the extra pain. The pain of the 3 miles on the legs was not as bad as the wandering mind. What do I do with the mind? After a while, after you get over the angst of the loneliness and and not knowing what to think about, then after a while it became I don't know how my days I made it through a day or made it through a week without that isolation time, because by the time I was finished with my 3 miles, I already had this straightened out, what I might say to this one, what I said to that one, what's going to be with this, what's going to be the my next priority and my next goal, and all these different things started to get straightened out, because as I'm jogging, things started falling into priorities and layers. Before then, I was, everything was splintered, and I didn't know, there was no organization, there was no layer. And I said, wow, this is great. This is the most precious. This is like a little bit of a Shabbos time I have over here. This 45 minutes, this hour that I take, that's away from everything, away from everybody. And then the Yetzer Hara finds a way. If you can bring your phone, and you have to bring some earphones, and earplugs, and not earplugs, but some kind of even a Torah share. Sometimes it's good just to do nothing, just to do absolutely nothing. And in the world of pre-Edison world, a person is forced to either become crazy or become great. That's what it's really all about. You have 2 choices. I used to talk to prisoners all the time, and I said, you always have 2 choices. Like the Torah says, "B'char to b'chayim." I put in front of you life and death. You can become crazy or you become great. And the Torah implores us, "B'char to b'chayim." Don't become crazy. Become great. That's the mitzvah in the Torah. It's to use that time to think. So when the sun would set, the person's eyes would turn inwards. So the person has a chance to think about, what did I do today? What am I doing with my life? What have I done with the last, 7 waking hours, the last 10 waking hours? What did I say to that person? How did I react? Was that okay? Was that not okay? Make a shtickl cheshbon and nefesh, right? Tachlis chachma, tshuva and maisim tovim. The goal of chachma, of wisdom, is 2 things: tshuva and maisim tovim. Tshuva is, let me review some of the past. Let me do what's called in German Treppenwerte. I have a friend who taught me that. That's the words you think about after you're done with the conversation. After I'm done with a speech or something like that, I get back into the car, and then your mind says, "Oh, that was dumb." And you do, "Hey, that was good. That was okay. Let me keep that. Let me throw that out. Let me not repeat that one again. That didn't. That landed like a lead balloon. I think I turned everybody off and hit their off buttons and insulted a few people when I said that. Got to watch out for that statement. And when you're talking with individuals and you're interacting throughout the day, there's certain things you want to improve on. What happened to that temper over here? Oh, temper, Clyde. Control yourself, don't react, don't overreact. There's a lot of things to review of what happened over the course of a day. And then also to plan what's going to happen the next day. Let's think about it, How do I want the next day to look? Right? Isn't that great? To sit and to think and to visualize, what are the opportunities? What am I going to be looking for? What are the triggers that I have to watch out for that I shouldn't end up, making the same mistakes and falling into the same traps, the same little sand traps that I fell into today, and to see myself doing something that taking on a challenge and doing it successfully. I say when an athlete is ready to step up and to perform an act, whatever it is, he's done it thousands of times in his mind. Not just, practiced it in the actual throwing or the shooting or the swinging or whatever it is that he's doing. He's done it thousands of times in his mind. He's rehearsing over and over again. You ever wonder how? So some 19-year-old, college basketball guy is sitting over there in his NCAA, and he's spinning the ball. He's on the line, with 2 seconds on the clock, and he's got to sink 2 foul shots, and he's in the away stadium, and everybody's making noise and screaming. Shot that ball, a million times in his mind before he touches it and feels it and spins it and shoots it. He doesn't see any of the thing. He doesn't hear anything that's going on around him. He's not thinking about the past. He's not thinking about the future. He's thinking about he's groomed himself and he's grooved himself for success. And that's where the battle is won and lost right there. How can a person focus? How can a person concentrate? There's so many distracting things. But if a person would prepare himself and see himself, giving a successful lesson or making a successful sale in the business, whatever you happen to be doing, I don't know. Everybody's doing different things, or navigating through some kind of a relationship issue or something like that, and making that call and doing it effectively and doing it in a way that you don't upset anybody, you don't upset yourself, and you don't burn bridges. You see yourself doing it. You work it out in your brain and you rehearse it in the quietude of your mind. Gavaldic. Then you get up the next day and you say, I wonder, hey, where did that success come from? It didn't come just naturally. Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care. It came through rehearsal. It came through thought, and it came through preparation. And so there's preparation that goes into the next day. And the first says that's why it's vihi erev vihi voker yom echad, because the thought, the next day, when we wake up and we launch ourselves into the world, into the next day is following what, like a tree, like the fruits are following the deep rivers of roots system, that it's the thought and it's the preparation that when it delivers the fruits of each very next day. That's how it works. And nothing, very little in our life is just coming about by accident. The world is the product of thought. Everything that we have around us is a product of thought. Right? They say, well, that's a very, obtuse or abstract, thought, Rabbi. That's the most practical, concrete statement that I could possibly make. The clothing that you're wearing, my mother was a dress designer. It's a product of thought, right? Take a look at it, right? This thing just happened to come together like this. It doesn't come together like this. Somebody, knew that there's going to be some fool who wants a black suit, only a black suit, and he wants it, and that the buttons have to be this size, not that size, not this size, not tall like you, not this like that, but this size, they have to have in mind, So someone was thinking about me, or someone like me, already beforehand, and that. Yeah, do you have another battery?
If not, you'll get the visual. It's good now.
What's that?
Good now.
It's good now. Okay. I probably made a sudden move. Okay, we'll keep it.
Just in case.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay, good. So everything, the batteries, the tape recorder, right? The svarim, the video machine, the cars, the chairs, the table, right? Everything. Somebody designed it. Somebody sitting there. A friend of mine was buying for school. He was buying, looking through a catalog. Different types of tables they can buy. Tables that your legs slip under nicely, and tables that the legs don't take up so much room. And you have narrow tables, and you have tables that have desks and shelves underneath them. Yeah, different types of tables because of different types of systems. So somebody's thinking and dreaming about and drilling together and lightweight tables and tables that can collapse and be folded against and put different types of tables. It doesn't happen by accident. Somebody was thinking about this. Somebody was designing it. Somebody was organizing it. And then the next thing you know, you walk into a room where there's a table. You walk into a room where there's a chair and it has a soft bottom. There's a soft bottom because it's thinking about you and thinking about your bottom and thinking about your comfort. So somebody made a chair. So we live in a world that was designed by and that was orchestrated and organized by human thought. Vayhi erev, vayhi voker, yom echad. First the fruits come up from the inside, and the fruit comes up from the hidden world, from the depth of thought. And then from machshava to dibor to ma'aseh, it manifests itself out into the world until heart,
I'm almost did the same thing.
Yeah.
He said, this is how you make $1 million.
Okay, thank you very much. I was just Rabbi Wine was on a bootleg tape.
Yeah.
That was called Pete Rose and the Jewish Question. I remember from many years ago. So Rabbi Wine was describing. He had a father-in-law, Rabbi Levin, who was an old-time European Rav who ended up in Detroit, if I'm not mistaken. And so he was describing. He called up his father-in-law, who was in his 90s, late 90s, he was in the hospital. And he said, Ta, how you doing? And he says, okay. He was in the hospital and had a heart issue, and he says, you feeling okay? Yeah. He says, I have to tell you, the father-in-law says something remarkable. He says, they got me hooked up on this machine. He says, and there's my picture of my heart, like beating on a monitor, right, like right in front of me. And he says, with all these different wires and nodes, on his body. And he said, okay, oh, that's interesting. He says, no. And he says, in comes this technician, a young doctor, And he said, and I told him, take a look at this. This is unbelievable. I told him, it's incredible to see my heart, beating like that, And he says, oh, Rabbi Levin, he says, that's nothing. He says, soon we'll be able to do it with the unintrusive nodes, we'll be able to, and to take a picture, we'll be able to see it with colors and contours. He says, this is just the beginning of the technology. It's nothing. And he says, I interrupted him in the middle of his diatribe, and I said to him, nar, fool. He says, I'm not talking about the machine. He says, I'm talking about the heart. He says, look at the heart. He says, that thing has been beating uninterrupted in my chest for the last 96 years, He says, look at the thing, and you're distracted by what, this cute and silly little invention that's only able to take a picture of and monitor, the action of that heart. Okay, so take a look at the different types of things, the design things that go into the world, and therefore you realize also that the whole world is design. Also, it's a designer universe. That's what Abraham Avinu had discovered. That there's thought that went into the world. There's thought that goes into a tree. There's thought that goes into grass. There's the thought that goes into the speed of light. There's thought. There's constants. There's laws that are in the nature. That somebody organized this thing and orchestrated it in such a sublime way that the world is a product of Vihi Erev Vihi Boker, that there was a world of darkness before there was this of deep darkness, but it's the Or of the Or Ein Sof before Kodesh Baruch Hu hid us from this world and brought in the light of this world. So we see that basically the premise is that Rav Hirsch points out is that v'hir v'hivoker is a person is like a tree, that we're producing from the inside out, and we're producing from the hidden into the revealed. That's how things happen. That's how productive life happens. If a person works the other way around, then that's not called productive life. Then the tree is unstable. The tree is upside down. We go out into the world without any thought. We go out and we're reacting to a world, and we're responding to everything we're seeing without any thought, without a plan. That's why the Zohar says, by the way, if Adam Rishon would have eaten from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, after having eaten from the Eitz HaChaim, he would have lived forever in the garden, with perfection in Gan Eden. How about that? I think we can understand it in a very practical way. What are these two trees, that were in Gan Eden? What type of two trees are they? So one of them was an Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, a tree of the knowledge of good and life. I once heard just a very simple, pashut explanation like this. What does it mean, Eitz Hadas Tov Ra? And what does it mean, Eitz HaChaim? So Eitz HaChaim is probably pretty easy, because we sing when we return the Torah to the back into the Ark on Shabbos. Eitz HaChaim Hi. Right? Shlomo Melech says in Mishlei, L'machazikim bo. It's a tree of life to those who hold on to it. Right? So what is a tree of life? Means that it's objective knowledge, right? It's a Kadosh Baruch Hu's picture and advice on how to live life, So without without having to go out and to learn through the hard experiences yourself. There's a mission in the fourth parak of Pirkei Avos that says, "Esu hu chacham," who is a wise person, halomid mikol adam, right? Learn from other people's mistakes. The Kadosh Baruch Hu is showing us what the kind and hevel do wrong, So don't touch that hot stove. You don't have to touch every hot stove for everybody else, for yourself, That's a fool's way. I have to go out and have to make all that. I'll figure it out myself, Figure it out yourself. Figure it out yourself, That's called. Figuring out yourself is the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. That's called the school of hard knocks. You want to go figure out stuff yourself? Go figure it out yourself. The tuition is free at first, but later on, it's the most expensive tuition. Right? That's what the Gemara says. That's the short, long way. Take a shortcut, and it ends up becoming a long cut. I don't want to ask anybody. I'll figure out how to get there myself. By the time you figure out how to get there yourself, it's 40 years later, and you figured it out. And you know the way pretty good. But in the meantime, you lost 40 years, and you lost your youth, and you got picked up a disease, and you picked up a chas v'shalom, all these different things that people happen. Sometimes you meet people in the nursing home, and they'll tell you something that sounds like, wow, it's a pasuk in Mishlei, but it took a whole life for them to learn it. And meanwhile, they lost this, and they lost that, and they lost the family, and they lost, only learn, never, always, wow, what a shame. If somebody would have learned from the Eitz Chaim, they would have learned from objective knowledge. So that's the long, short way. The long, short way is read the instruction manual. You got a brand new car, read the instruction manual. Don't find out the hard way, right? It took me 4 or 5 cheap cars to figure out the 2 very, very important words that I had never learned about these words when I was growing up. Nobody ever taught me about it in college and when I was growing up. And those 2 words are oil change, right? Never heard about that, You got to change the oil, All of a sudden I wondered, what's that black smoke coming out from the back of my vehicle? I put gas in, I put the pedal to the metal, I fill it up with regular, How come I get gas in New Jersey cheap, How come, why I burnt out this car and that car and this car? Oil change. Oh, every once in a while a mechanic did it. He didn't tell me he was doing it. He just added it to the bill. And that's why I happened to make it, this one lasted a bit longer, this one a little less longer. So mazel and glick. So somebody did an oil change once in a while. But I didn't know to do it. And then we took out a mortgage, a 7-year thing on a car. 7 years, we payments, $232.93 every month. So now all of a sudden, we took that user's manual out of the glove compartment, we brought it into the bathroom, and we highlighted certain things, 3,000, 5,000, rotate, this, that, boom, that's the stuff we're going to do, You're going to get married, you're going to live a life, eat from the Eitz Chaim before you eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. Learn for 40 years in the Midbar before you go into Eretz HaKodesh. Because we're eating from the Eitz Chaim. Before we go into the subjective world of the land over there, and suddenly we're confronted by materialism and by appetites and all kinds of politics and stuff like that. So figure out what the right thing is before you get into the saddle and before you get torn up by all of your feelings. Find out objectively what the right thing to do is. So that's what one tree is. One tree is the Eitz HaChaim, right? That's to find out objectively how to live it and how to go about it. And if Adam would have eaten from the Eitz HaChaim, Chaim, would have eaten from the correct tree first, then it would be like Klal Yisrael. Rav Hirsch also says, he says, living in the desert for 40 years and learning the Torah before going into Eretz HaKodesh. Learning the rules of marriage and the rules of engagement before getting involved with marriage and before becoming entangled in a relationship. And what happens in the world? People eat from the Eitz Das Tov Ra and then from the Eitz Chaim. They go out and they, met her in a candy store, smiled at me and get the picture. They met him in that would be the innocent place in a candy store, but you saw him in a bar, and all of a sudden there's all kinds of emotions and this and that, and now try to disentangle that baby. The Shulchan Aruch on how to live a good life is only about, really it's only about 2 pages. This is the whole thing. We're going to need a library this thick. That's the whole library. That's it. The Aseret Dibros, whatever. It's simple. But once you mess it up, right, then you need a whole Shulchan Aruch on how to sort things out. Once they're broken. You need a big hospital. To stay healthy. I'll give you a very nice easy regimen to stay healthy. Once a person becomes sick, so then we need a whole pharmaceutical department, and we need a medical department, and we need a wing for this and a wing for that, and all kinds of different wings. And hospitals and personnel, and a whole guns of hospital in order to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. How to live healthy and how to be healthy? Well, that's pretty simple. In order to have a successful marriage, so there's a way to do it. In order to divorce court, they don't have enough lawyers and haven't got enough judges to handle all the, to mop up all the problems. Enough psychiatrists and psychologists, for all the situations, where things are already confused. That's what the Vilna Gaon explains. He says in the beginning of Mishlei, his commentary says, he explains Chochmah and Musar. Chochmah is to know objectively, to try to know correctly what the right thing to do is. And then Musar, he says, that's how to extract yourself once you're already bitten by the bug, and how to sort things out afterwards. That requires Musar, right? Which is another expression of Yisurin. So the premise that we're saying over here anyway is that the tree of life, and the way to do things is, the first is Hi Erev, and then Vayihi Voker Yom Echad. First starts out with evening. We're working from the inside. We're working from with Yegiyah in the objective world, from building from the inside out. And developing thought. And it's a very interesting thing. It says that the whole of Tehillim starts out like this. It's a beautiful idea, Tehillim. I remember once, until I realized that someone told me, it's Torah Shabbat Label. What are you doing that for? That it's not really the correct way to memorize Torah Shabbat. You want to memorize something? Memorize Pirkei Avos. I got into a memorization kick. And I said, something? Let me memorize Tehillim. So I started out memorizing Tehillim. And I got through a couple already, and someone said, that's not Lozu Haderech, right? In the meantime, it got me repeating it over and over again and thinking about and cogitating on this notion of the first kapitel Tehillim. And what is David HaMelech tells us? He says, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'asas Rishoyim. Happy is the person he doesn't go in the way of Rishoyim. The Hirsch says Ashrei means that he's forward striding. He has a whole way of an etymological approach explaining how Ashrei is related to Yashar, is related to not just happiness. It's accomplishing and feeling accomplished. Ashrei ha'ish, happy is that person. Asher lo halach ba'asas Rishoyim. He didn't go in the ways of Rishoyim. Ubederach hatoyim lo amad, and he didn't stand in the way of sinners. But Moshav Leitzim lo yashav. He's not hanging around with the wrong people. Remember, I used to go visit prisoners, and nobody did it. It's an amazing thing, Or they have sometimes 40 guys, 50 guys, and anybody you talk to, they'll come and say, I didn't do it. What? You didn't do it. Whatever it is they said I didn't do it. Nobody did anything. It's amazing that nobody did anything. You have everybody is a victim of, how's that possible? Okay, some of them I'm sure it's possible. And almost everyone came over to tell me their story about how, I didn't do it. It's incredible. But when it came Elul time, I used to crack the whip. And I said, okay, you didn't do it. You didn't, because you can get off on a technicality over here. You were in the room, but you weren't the one with the bag, and you weren't the one who, and you were only, and you were sitting in the getaway car. But if you would have been hanging around with the right people, if you would have been in the base medrash, right, would this have happened? And the answer is no. Of course, But you're hanging around with the wrong people. You're schmoozing about the wrong things. You're trying to make a quick buck. You gotten pulled into a scheme, and then you didn't know how to get out of it. And then this guy made you do something, and it wasn't you. Yeah, but you were in the wrong place. You're doing the wrong thing. You're hanging around with the wrong types of people, and that's what happened. You get sucked into it. Get pulled into the whirlpool over there. So the first thing he says is Sur Mirage, just to avoid hanging around with the wrong people. Don't sit with them. Don't walk with them. Don't listen to them. Don't be around with the wrong people. Hang around good people. And then he gives the second part. He gives Im Besoros Hashem Chefso. He says, so now the person chases away. Let's take a look. It's just the person and his thoughts. Don't even think those thoughts. It's like the person sitting alone on his Shabbos, and now his mind is going crazy. So what should I be busy with? I don't know what to be. I enjoy watching these games, and I enjoy listening to this, and I enjoy the pundits and all the and all that false pilpul that goes on. But what should I rather think about? Once I block that out, I'm ready to go crazy. No, the Torah hates a vacuum. The mind hates a vacuum. It doesn't want a vacuum. Can't sit alone and do nothing. We're not mushrooms. But if the Torah of Hashem is his desire, suddenly he opens up and he says, something, I want to understand. What is the Torah teaching me? I want to amplify the voice, the neshama. Actually, the Torah is the neshama speaking. It amplifies the voice of the neshama. It amplifies the conscience of the person. That's what it is. That's what the Torah does. It's not just a rule book or a legal book. It amplifies our own neshama. It gives a voice, and it gives logic and reason, and it gives motivation to our neshama. And yega is thinking. If the person's going to be thinking about Torah day and night, and now comes the big prize over here. He says, the person will be like a tree that's planted by still waters. Listen to what he says over here. He's like a tree. He's going to give off its fruit in the right time. Everything he does will be successful. And even his leaves won't wither. The Gemara says, the Gemara in Sukkah says that even the light conversation of tzaddikim requires that everything about him, everything he says, is imbued with chokhmah and wisdom. Even the light conversation of tzaddikim, a great person. Wow. So the person becomes a shtik Torah. I remember reading this and feeling like very disappointed. Wow, you'll do this and you'll do that, and you'll be like a tree. A tree stuck in the mud, And think to myself, wow, that sounds like the big prize of history, is to be like a tree. And I remember feeling a little bit bugged out by it, like, that's it. That's the grace of promise over here, I said maybe it would be more exciting, if they promised you'd be like a butterfly, wow, that you'll climb up and be like a bird. And sitting up on the top of a tree, blackbird sitting, sitting up there. Like sometimes you see a blackbird and they're looking down, and they're squawking, and there's 2 or 3 of them fighting on the top of a tree, and they're having themselves a good old time, and they're waiting for a squirrel to get run over in the neighborhood or something like that, and then they swoop down and they fight over until a car comes and they pick up a piece of meat from there's a good time, where a butterfly, everybody's chasing him with a butterfly net, but he can climb higher and higher, in the tree, he's just sitting over there, he's stuck, So what's the big lick? What's the big accomplishment and the big? What's the great praise that a person's going to be like a tree? And you want to know something? It really, it's kind of disappointed me. Be like a tree. And it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, because what happens is when you look out the window. I had a friend of mine told me he's a big bulvana, big strong guy, an Israeli fella. He said when he was. He said, the Gemara says, Oy li yitzri, oy li yotzri. Woe to my creator, woe to my yetzer. He realized, he says, when he was out in the world, having his way and doing everything he wanted to do, without inhibition, without limit, he says, his conscience was bothering him. He had a natural conscience. What can he do? Like they said, there's a Rebbe and his son, they were breaking into the ice. They were trying to, get into the freezing cold mikveh. And when the son went in first, the Rebbe, with his black beard, he jumped into the cold, freezing lake, river, whatever. And when he pulled himself out, his icicles, were all over his beard. But he went in screaming, "Ouch! Ouch! Ouch!" It's not so easy to get into a cold swimming pool, to get into the mikvah. You imagine going into an ice, river, And when he came out, there's that there's And the father realized, the old Rebbe realized this is the teachable moment. And he said, "Man Zind," he says, "I just want you to remember," he says, "when it comes to mitzvahs," he says, "they start out ouch, 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 but they end up ooh ah." He says, when it comes to averas, they start out ooh ah, and they end up ouch, ouch, ouch. So there's a reverse thing over here. He says when he was out in the world and everything was ooh ah, So at night, he would hear his mind would ache and he'd go, ouch, ouch, ouch. That's not the way to treat people. That's not the way to get along. That's not the way to build a life. That's not the way, you Shrek, But he was having his way. Everything was ooh-ah in the beginning, And now that he came to yeshiva, and it's ouch, ouch, ouch. You're sitting here trying to, reason with the Gemara, and you're trying to hold cup, and you're opening up that first page, and you're looking at it, and you're sitting there with a coffee in your hand, and all of a sudden you hear a car swoop by. Woo! People are having fun, like a Newport commercial or something like that, and the top of the car is down, and and we have these cars in the neighborhood with, I'm sure you also, with the whole neighborhood, and you say, wow, I'm missing out on something, I'm over here, just sitting and reading a couple of Torah words, and out there is really where it's happening, and we feel like we're missing something. You feel like a schnook, you feel like a schnook, you're missing out on something, Oily Yitzri, woe to my Yetzer, oily Yotzri, or woe to my Creator. So the Yetzer Hara now starts to bother you, and it starts to bother you especially by Talmud Torah. It's not my idea, but you see that the Yaakov Avinu had to wrestle with a malach when it came to learning Torah. He had a big opposition in his life, Yaakov Avinu. Avram Avinu had very little opposition in his life. Very little opposition. Go set up a soup kitchen. You're not going to say, "Oh, we're a soup kitchen. Oh, you're busy helping people feeding people." No, your soup kitchen. People are going to agree with a soup kitchen. You want to set up Yitzchak went out into the field to meditate. L'suach b'sada. You want to set up a meditation center. We're going to sit. We're going to get quiet. We're going to, and we're going to get deep. Nice. Beautiful. Kol hakavod shecha, mamish. It's gewaldig. Go learn Torah? Oh, Torah, Suddenly the whole world is going to be against you. A yeshiva? You're going to make a yeshiva over here? What? In this neighborhood? Not in my neighborhood. And suddenly the school board, I can't tell you how much fight comes back. And why? Because the Gemara says in Sukkah Nun Beis, he says, Misha Godel Mechavero Yitzro Godel Hamenu. Because the greater something is, the greater the opposition to that thing is. Right? The greater a person is, the greater the opposition, and the greater something is, the greater the opposition to that idea. And if it's a small idea, there's no opposition. If you're not a chassid, then you don't have any misnagdim. But if you're a chassid, then you're a real chassid. Then you have to expect that you have real misnagdim. People are going to go against you. If you don't have anybody against you, it could be you're not really a chassid. So he got this idea. Torah. You want to bring emes into the world? Suddenly everybody wants to shut emes up. Everybody wants to kick him off the block. Not in my neighborhood, not in my backyard. So, and with the person himself also, not just in the neighborhood, in the person himself, in the neighborhood of your mind. The minute you want to see Jewish weightlifting? This is Jewish weightlifting. You want to see it? That's it. Did you see that? Opening up the first cover of the Sefer. Right? That's what it says in this week's parsha, as a matter of fact. V'haya im shemoa. If you're going to listen, what does it say? V'haya im shemoa. And now, im shemoa tishmu b'koli. If you're going to listen to my voice, ushemartem es brisi, and you're going to guard my bris. He says, "Vayisim li l'segula mikol ha'amim." You're going to be chosen from amongst all the nations. You're going to be a treasure. Ki li kol ha'aretz, because the Kodesh Baruch Hu says the whole world belongs to me. And what does Rashi say over there? He says, "Why? And now? What's the and now about it?" He says, "Imatat tekablo lechem." If you're going to accept it upon yourself now, and now, you just got to get started. The hard part is getting started. Rashi says. He says, "Then ya'arav lechem mikan ve'elech." I'm going to make it sweet from you from here and further. Shekol has chalas kashas, because all beginnings are difficult. Just get started. Lift the weights. Get started. Once you get started, then it gets easier. The beginning part is very, very difficult. I once heard from a Rebbe of it was like a Rosh Hashiva, young Rosh Hashiva, and I said, how come at the beginning of the year there's a lot of enthusiasm in the first days of this month, right? A lot of ha-ha, And we got the number 2 sharpened pencils, and you have the tumult for the chavrusas, and first day is. He said, Rashi says, "Kol haskalas kashas" over here. I said, it should be the first day is the difficult day. That's not the day when everybody's hoo-ha and everything, And then later on, you see the Zman peters out. So it's not like Rashi says, "Kol haskalas kashas." It's later on it becomes difficult. He said a very Kutzker-like word to me. Wow, this is like a deadly, deadly. Okay, he says because for a lot of the fellas, he says it's not the beginning, it's the end already. Like you see people make bar mitzvahs and it's the last day of Jewish education. It's not the first day of the Jewish education. And people make a big wedding, but the wedding was just like, it's the end of the party. That's the end of the wedding. After that, it's like only like, how do we return the presents now that we, because it wasn't a launching to go forward. It was a party to celebrate some kind of a status quo, static picture that they had in their mind. In order to break through, so a person has to have a weiter picture in their mind. So Misha Godel Mechavero Yitzro Godel Hamenu. And therefore, there's nothing greater than Torah. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. And therefore, it's Kulam Keneged Talmud Torah. The whole world is against Talmud Torah. And that's why David HaMelech promises over here, you be like a tree. So what's the greatness of a tree? So there's two things that people struggle with all the time. Someone mentioned before when we talked about Shabbos. We mentioned the idea like, what are people afraid of? They're afraid of change. So change makes us feel insecure. And yet we want security. And security is a way of sort of like, what do we do about change? These are the two things that politically also the whole world is struggling with. Do you want change, or do you want, or do you want security? If you want security, then you don't have change. And yet it says again in Chumash, it says over again, "V'hayim shemo etishmu." If you're going to listen to the old, you'll learn new. So by staying with that which is secure, you'll be open to, and you'll make yourself available to that which is new. When it comes to Torah, the more you're going to review that which is old, then you'll make yourself available, interesting phenomena, to that which is new. It's a queer phenomena by Torah. No one's going to read yesterday's newspaper. We spoke about it. No one's going to read yesterday's newspaper and over again, and it's going to make you more familiar with today. After yesterday is finished, it's finished. But you're going to learn Chumash, you're going to review Chumash and Mishnayos, so then you're ready to hear a Chiddush. You get ready to hear something new. And therefore, when a person's like a tree, there's nothing more dynamic than a tree, and there's nothing more secure than a tree. It's a happening. A tree is a happening. It's a slow unfolding happening, but it's a happening. Well, I took a basketball court area in the back of my house because we have a steep driveway. So when my wife and I say it's the best investment we ever made. We took like a driveway's worth of in the backyard of our house in Muncie, and we put out a basketball court area out there. Spent $1,000. That was the day also I put a basketball thing over there. I didn't read the instructions. Talk about, that's my mushal also for, you got to follow the Eitz HaChaim and not the Eitz HaDas. And my son was sitting there with the instruction manual, all laid out in the backyard and saying, okay, we take this bolt. And he had it all, and I said, it's easy. Just put this thing in here, And after I said, but what do we do with this bolt? He says, Abba, that was supposed to go in, and before you did that, I said, so, for the next, 20 years, so the basket has this wobble in it, as a zeicher for, Abba, you should have followed the instruction manual. I know. Maybe we'll put a piece of cardboard in there, and that'll keep it. The cardboard gets wet, and the thing that that's a monument to my stupidity. And we all have monuments to our own stupidity. Okay. So, but meanwhile, we put this basketball court back there, and it must be like a little acorn must have planted right next to where, and like a little tree came up. A little tree started coming up. And the truth is, the first couple of weeks, I could have ripped that thing out, with my teeth. I could have bent it and just, and pulled it off. But I let it go that season. Then I'd let it go the next season. Then I let it go the next year. And now, 20 years later, this thing is pushing up the whole concrete on the on the backyard. I mean, it is huge, and it towers above, and it must go hundreds of feet into the air, and it drops down leaves that we have to sweep off. But I remember when it was this. I remember when it was this small. So a person take a look, and you take a zehal cotton godel year. You take a look at this person that they're focusing on Torah, and they're sitting over there, and they didn't move. And they didn't quit. And they didn't leave that spot. How many people get up and they move from place to place? And they get up and they leave from yeshiva to yeshiva. And they get up and they move from community to community. And the guys who stayed, I saw, who stayed in yeshiva, and they stayed 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years, and they didn't move, and they stayed with it. So they became successful, And everybody, every time they think, they get a little disappointed and they leave and they go some other place. And they get disappointed, they go someplace. Stay in one place, It's not so easy sometimes until you find the place. Sometimes you have to move a few times. But once you find your place, and you find yourself a place, you start to get busy with Torah, and all of a sudden your mind is flooding with Torah, and you have many sources. Nothing's going to destabilize you. There's water coming from here. I can learn Mishnah, I can learn Halacha, I can learn Hasidus, I can learn I can learn medrash. There's a lot of different things. I have a rebbe for halacha. I have a rebbe for this. I have someone who can call up. I have tapes. You have different avenues and streams that you can feed yourself. Whoa! You start to grow. And the person grows in security because here I am, in this place. Here's my community. Here's my friendship. And then this change that's happening, but it's gradual change. You come back the next year a little taller, a little thicker, a little wiser, a little more improved. It's not dramatic change like the butterfly goes over here like this year's fashions and jumps from one place to the other. And then the next year's fashion, now you got to have glasses that look like this. Then you have glasses that look like this. And then you got a uniform that looks like that. You look at the wedding pictures from a few years ago and you say, I can't believe we looked like that. I can't believe the hair was like that. People think things are changing all the time. And everybody who's responding to every new fashion change and listening to everything that's so they're like, okay, like a butterfly. You'd be like a butterfly. But the butterfly is here today and the butterfly's not around, in 10, 15, 20 years. You come back and you visit a tree is back there, it's still there. 20 years later, 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, 60 years later, 70 years later, 80 years later, to have a relationship, to have a family, to have a makam, makam kavua, and to grow, and the period yiten beito. He says the big prize over here is that the tree unfolds, all the right things come out in the right season. When it's time to do this, it's time to get married, get married. When it's time to have children, you have children. When it's time to do the next thing, then do the next thing. All those things, that's the big promise. So there is something beneficial. You can have the dynamism and the availability for change, but it's the right type of change, and it's the right pace of change. And you have also that security that comes along with being ka'et shasul al pagimayim. Over there, David HaMelech promises that a person can't go wrong. So here we are, Tu B'Shvat, talking about trees, And trees is a moshel, Kodesh Baruch Hu wants us to take a look at the trees, and to use them and to see and to reflect on our own situation over here. That's what we happen to find ourselves with Bisman Hazeh. And therefore this invention that we mentioned earlier on, that Edison came up with, a person walks into the world and is a world without thought these days. We're affected by every new fashion and everything because we're looking outward. We forgot to take the time to go inward and to get deep into the world of Hegisa Bo Yom and Balayla. To be busy with it, to turn our minds on, to turn on your heart light. Okay, how about that? When the lights of the world go off, then the light of the heart goes on. But until the lights of the world go off, then the light of the heart does not go on, and it makes it much more difficult. And therefore the tree remains very shallow, and it doesn't have a chance to develop its root system to grow in the way. The person goes out into the world and is reacting to a world, and then he retreats into the darkness at the end of the day, for a period of time, only to maybe gain enough courage to go back. And it beats us. It's like a tree that has very shallow roots. When the wind blows, the person feels very insecure and very and unstable. But if we can sort of, block off that time, get some quiet time, get into a dark space, And truth is, if the person turns off, the computer, turns off we find a lot more of that type of time, Turn off the cell phone, we find a lot more of that type of time also. Turn off the TVs, also find certainly a lot more of that type of time that we have around, And that's the time, and that's the type of thinking that will be produced from that. The first couple hours, you turn off the radio. That type of loneliness is very, very painful at first. But once those things are off, the mind will either decide it's going to become great or crazy. And then you pick up a Torah thought. You find something in the parsha. You find a pasuk. You find something that you like, and you repeat it, and you think about it. And then the Hagisa Bayom Valayla, and you let it be your theme, and you make a little song out of it, and you make it a part of your system, and it starts to take little roots inside you, and it starts to get giant root system. Next thing you know, over the course of years, this thing, that little root, that little plant, that little seed that was once something that could have, when it first entered in your mind in the first couple of weeks, you could have snapped it off like that little branch. But if you let it go for a period of time, it becomes a monster in your mind. And a good monster, I'm saying, a fruit-bearing monster in your mind. And then the person finds himself feeling very, very secure. That's what makes the difference between, the average man that's walking in the street and somebody who takes a Torah thought into their mind. We mentioned before, the person who says he's going on the way and he says, a beautiful tree, beautiful field. Amar Kasav ki alav ki ilum mischayev benasho. Why? Because he was mafsikim in mishnasa. He interrupted his learning, And he saw a tree, and he saw a field, and he saw what a tree can become, what a person can become. And he saw a field, and a blank field. He said, that's what my mind is. My mind is a blank field. And I see if you plant a seed inside that mind, and you nourish it, you take care of it, it can produce a tree inside my mind. And if I want to put many trees in my mind, I can put an orchard into my mind. I can put Gan Eden into my mind, and create a world of principles and a world of beautiful ideas, fruit-giving ideas and ideals in my mind. Or I could let whatever the TV and the radio and the pundits want to put into my brain, and then I'm walking around like who knows what, feeling shallow and feeling insecure. Pebbles and ponds are our ponderings, but boulders and oceans were our Father's notions, whose waves still rock the sea, whose waves still rock the sea. So when we take a look, we cogitate, we meditate on what a tree is. The Haya Ka'et Shasul al Pagimayim. So you see that David HaMelech was offering a big prize to us, a big opportunity. And the Torah offers a big opportunity. A person takes into the soil of his mind, into his personality, a couple of good Torah ideas, and he holds on to them, and he keeps them into his bowels. Then there's no limit to what that one idea can produce. It's good to get your hands on one idea. One idea. Don't let go of it. Don't let go of it. Hold on to it. Like a woman becomes impregnated with one seed. That's it. Hold on to it. Hold on to it. And you'll see it 9 months. Don't even tell anybody about it. Let that be your best friend. Write it into a book. Minanili mili. A couple of words. Whatever that word happens to be. Kushtakai, shiklarokkai. Truth remains. Falsehood doesn't remain. Grab onto a phrase like that. Something that you identify with. Piasatz Rebbe we mentioned before, the other time says, if a person finds a line in Torah, finds something, and it speaks to you, he says, it's like you got prophecy. He says, that's prophecy of Zman Hazeh. Because that's the Torah talking to you. No one else, noticed that line in Chumash. No one else underlined that Rashi that you underlined. If I give everybody here a Chumash, I give out everybody. Every here is a Chumash. We'll meet back in the year. Underline in the next year. Everybody underline 50 psukim. What do you think the chances are that we're all going to come back with the same 50 psukim underlined? What do you think the chances are? What do you think the chances are? Right? You're going to say one pasuk is going to sing to you. It's not going to sing to me. I don't get it. And, maybe we might have one or two, amongst us, or 3 or 4, maybe even 10. That might. What are the chances that any one of us has all the same 50? I don't think so. I don't even think exact identical twins are going to come back with the same 50. It ain't going to happen. Why? Because we say every day in our davening, "V'sein chelkeinu b'tzarasecha." Amongst the great things that we ask for, "She'abane beis hamikdash b'mehera v'yameinu." V'sein chelkeinu b'tzarasecha. Give us our portion in Torah. That's what we're looking for. We ain't looking to master everything, That's part of the, generic curriculum, the core curriculum. But all we're really looking for, and all that stands a chance of really helping us and making us into that v'haya ka'et shasul al palgimayim, and to be like that tree, is that we use our portion of Torah. V'sein chelkeinu b'tzarasecha. Let us use our portion of Torah. And that's not so difficult to find. If we take a look and we shop to the Torah, emes kenei, bi'al timchor, find the truth, and don't sell it. Hold on to it and keep it close to yourself. Then we hold on to that idea. Then we'll know what to do when the lights go out and we don't have these other things. We're able to let go of those things, and be able to live happily without them, much more happily. But it's very, very painful. It's like that Shabbos until you get to that point where you can let go of it and you can be happy with just the concept, just with an idea, a Torah idea that's dancing in your mind. That'll be your friend. That'll be your pet. That'll be your best friend. That'll be your chavrusa. Even when there's no chavrusa around. That's a goal. That's something that's worthy of striving for. Okay, wish everybody a good Tu B'Shvat. And v'haya ka'et shasul al pal yamayim, should be like trees that are planted by many water sources. Shkoyach.